you are actually connecting to where. It's my pleasure welcoming Jeff Gothelf for tonight. It's really a huge pleasure. Jeff is somebody whose books I admire and know a lot since a few years. Not sure mentioning,
easy to recognize anyone from the way you are actually
mute this one. Mentioning two of them, Sense and Respond, I know, and Lean UX, easy to read here. And Jeff's back. And there is another one, I can't remember the title, but I loved it. It's a very short one. It was something about this design thinking, agile, and all these buzzwords. I loved it.
Yeah, it's called Lean versus Agile versus Design Thinking.
All right.
Which in hindsight is a bad title. It should have been Lean and Agile and Design Thinking.
Okay. No, but I love the attempt and the whole scope. And today, it's about Jeff's new book, Forever Employable, and I think it's super interesting for the current times, of course, for all the future. But I think, here's a couple of probably coaches also online, because it's the Agile Coaching Exchange, might be any other profession. But given the past few weeks and months, everybody might have looked into their portfolio and their current projects, and maybe even into their plans, what they want to do, and have recognized, I'm not sure. There's a ton of uncertainty ahead. What am I going to do with my job, with my role in anything? And I think that's where Jeff's book hits in immediately. And I'm just your facilitator, Mike Leber, today, and I'm hopefully a quiet facilitator. So I'm handing over now to Jeff. Welcome, Jeff. It's your turn, and I'm just helping out here, whatever is
awesome.
needed.
Cool. Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks so much for having me. And this is it's great to be here and part of this conversation. I'm going to tell you a story, and the story's got about it's about 25, 30 minutes total. I'm going to pause a few times throughout the story to either ask you a question. We've got a poll. And generally speaking, I'd love to see your comments in the chat. So I'll prompt you for that as well. And we can kind of go through that if there's any, since we're on a call, not a webinar, if there's any clarifying questions I could ask you, and you can kind of unmute and join the call. And then we'll just do a Q&A at the end. Now, the interesting thing here is that as I was saying kind of at the beginning before we officially started, I have gotten better at telling this story. At first, I didn't really want to tell it at all because it's a personal story. You'll see in a second here. It starts off with a personal story, and I've never really shared my personal life online. I've never talked about my family. I've never talked about finances or job hunting or things like my fears, my panic attacks, that type of thing. And so I was really kind of concerned that this story wouldn't resonate. But over the last couple of months, as we've started sharing bits and pieces of the story, and I've been starting to figure out how to tell it, I've gotten more comfortable with it. I think you'll find it interesting, hopefully valuable. And then, like I said, we'll do some Q&A along the way. And so I'm going to share my screen here with you, and you can see that there, I hope. And the story starts on my 35th birthday. On the morning I turned 35, January 31st, 2008, I turned 35 years old. Now you can do the math and figure out exactly how old I am. It's not difficult math. I am 29 years old today. It's just perfect. I woke up on my 35th birthday and I really have this like panic attack. It's cold. I wake up in a cold sweat and it's not clear to me why, but I'm sweating and I'm terrified and I have no idea why. Because look, up until that point, everything was going well. These are my kids. This is me when I was 35. These are my kids. I had 2 daughters. And I'd had a pretty good run up until this point. Considering where I'd started, right? I had a job in New York City. It was a good paying job. I was a manager of a design team, married, 2 kids. I had a house, 2 cars, like basically what they call the American dream. And I had a good run getting there. I started off in college and university and after university as a broke musician. I tried to be a rock star for a bunch of years, played keyboards in a bunch of bands. And didn't make any money, and was saved by the internet. The internet came around in the late 90s, and I was tired of being broke, and I got a job. Now, in 1999, if you remember, if you were working in 1999, you'll remember that pretty much if you could spell HTML, you could get a job in 1999. And I did, and I got a job at a web consulting company, Web 1.0 consulting company, one of the big ones, called IXL, as a front-end developer. I did markup, I did HTML, and graphic designer. And shortly thereafter, I started earning some real money, and I recognized that I was at the end of the waterfall, right? The years 1999, 2000. We're doing waterfall software development primarily. And I didn't like being at the end of the waterfall. And so somebody turned me on to this book here. This is a book called Information Architecture for the World Wide Web. This book is now in its 4th edition. And this book changed my life. I've been fortunate enough to meet the authors, and I count Lou Rosenfeld, who's one of the authors, as a friend. And I've told him this book changed my life because it made me want to be an information architect. Now, in Waterfall, the information architect sits further upstream than the front-end designer and developer. So that worked for me. And I set off down this path to become an information architect. And then the dot-com bubble bursts. And all of a sudden I've got this new career direction, and I'm making money, and there's no work, and I'm bouncing around. I do some work at AOL for a while. I end up on the West Coast of the United States working at Web Trends. And then finally, about 10 years into my career, I end up back in New York City at the Ladders, 35 years old. I have a good job. I'm managing a team, right? Everything's going great. I've got a decent salary. I'd clawed my way up to middle management. And so I wake up on the morning of my 35th birthday, and I'm terrified. And I realize eventually why I'm having this panic attack. And it's this. I recognize very clearly that there were many younger, better, faster, more talented designers coming up in the design world, and they were better than me. They were hungrier than me, and most importantly, they were cheaper than me. I was hiring them for my team, and I knew how much I was paying them and how much I was making. And my fear was that in 5 years, from 35, right? In 5 years, I was going to be 40, which meant I was going to be old, which is funny to say from this side of 40. But I was going to be old, expensive, and unemployable. Basically, I was going to command too much salary and not have the skill sets to back it up. I was going to lose to these hungrier, younger designers. And so on that morning, I made a very big resolution to myself. I said, look, I'm no longer going to look for jobs. If I have to keep throwing my CV into the marketplace and compete with these younger, better, cheaper, hungrier designers, I was going to lose. I wasn't going to win. And so I had to create a situation where jobs were going to look for me, right? Instead of a push system, I want to create a pull system. I want to get pull jobs to me. That's ultimately what I was looking for, right? And it's a big resolution, right? And you're like, wow, Jeff, those are really important words, kind of blows your mind, right? But ultimately, it starts to bring up some very, very important questions. You can say all the big resolution words and phrases that you'd like, but there's some real big questions to ask, right? First question is this: does anyone know who I am? Right? The year's 2008. I'm 10 years into my career. Does anyone know who I am? Right? If they're going to look for me, why? Why would they look for me? What problem do I help them solve? Right? What would people come to me to help them with? How would they find me? Right? So where am I going to live online, technically, so that they would find me? And then ultimately, if I'm going to be successful, what kind of work do I want, right? If I'm going to attract these jobs to me, these opportunities, what kind of work do I want to show up, right? I wanted interesting work to show up. And so this really got me thinking about the core value that I deliver at the time as a designer, a product manager, a design leader. And it got me thinking about that. I want to pose that question to you, the group here. And I'm curious if you could put something in the chat. I'm open up the chat on my side here. If you were to think about your core value, right? Why would jobs look for you, right? What problem do you help people solve? Can you put some thoughts about that in the chat for those of you? Just open up the chat, and if I was to ask you one-on-one this question, what problem do you help people solve? What's your core value? Why would jobs look for you? What would you put in there in the chat? Yeah, so Rainer says, look, realizing the potential of being agile, right? These days, I'm sorting things out. I love that, right? Things are always in chaos, right? Help them with their imposter syndrome. That's fantastic. Everyone has that. Everyone has that, right? A guide through uncertainty. Super interesting, right? Like, if you look at some of this stuff, you guys have really done some interesting thinking about this, because if you look at some of these phrases, right, there are no real brand names or buzzwords in this, right? If you're helping people work in teams, if you're a trustworthy guide through uncertainty, then you can deliver that in a variety of different ways in different formats, right? Running programs and projects in complex environments, exactly, right? This is the kind of stuff, and it really got me thinking as well about how to do this, right? How do you collaborate to build great products? That's what I do too, Sonia, right? Is work with teams to help them build great products. And boiling that down starts to help you create a message to put out to the world that will hopefully then start to attract people who have these particular issues, right? Which is what I did. So I spent the next 10 plus years, at this point it's about 12 years, building my platform around that core value. And what I recognized was that there were 5 qualities in myself that I used to kind of build this platform and become forever employable, create this kind of magnet for opportunities. And that there were 5 specific steps that I took to achieve that. And if you kind of add all that stuff up, it boils down to this. You have to treat your career and your professional development as a product in the same way that you work with your teams today to help them deliver successfully digital programs, products and services. You have to think about your your career and your professional development in the same way as a product, as this continuously improving and evolving system. And the qualities that help you get there, and these are the qualities that I discovered in myself to help me get there, are these 5 qualities: entrepreneurialism, self-confidence, continuous learning, improvement, and reinvention. And this being sort of an agile coaching meetup, right? This should sound very familiar to you, right? This is agile, or perhaps more accurately, this is agility. But instead of focusing these qualities on products, we're focusing these qualities on our careers and our professional development and growth. And what's interesting is that at least when I started thinking about these things as applied to myself, I struggled a bit to really understand whether or not I actually had these qualities. So entrepreneurialism, for example, I'd never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I'm not the ideas guy, I'm the execution guy, right? But as I looked at the things I had done in my life, there were clear examples of entrepreneurial behavior that I'd put together and that had taught me those ways of working. I was in bands for a decade, right? Bands are startups. You have a crazy idea, you and your friends get together, pour everything you have into it, and try to convince the world to buy your product, basically, right? I had done this. I had an entrepreneurial experience, which was really helped drive my self-confidence. Now, look, as we talk about identifying our core value and building a platform around it, self-confidence always seems to be lacking, right? People don't think they've got the experience or the expertise or the story to build that self-confidence. But the reality is that the experience that you have to date, whether it's a year, 5 years, or 25 years, has value, your knowledge has value, and the things that you have done to get to where you are today have value, have made you the person you are today, have gotten you to where you are today. And they've taught you self-confidence along the way. as I look at the experiences that I've had in my life, the unique parts of my story, I spent 6 months in the circus. I graduated from university on a Saturday, and on Monday, I joined the circus, and I spent 6 months touring with a circus in the United States. A situation that I thought was going to be a disaster. It was pretty tough, you know, and I survived it, and I learned a ton about myself and kind of, being agile in new, difficult, scary situations. So I have the self-confidence to start telling my story around that. Continuous learning, obviously a key to making our products and services better, can also make our career better, right? Reading, speaking with others, engaging in the community, experimenting, always trying these new things helps us learn and get better. That's what I did with the information architecture book. And it's that learning that you pick up that will drive your continuous improvement. Continuous improvement comes from this sense of enthusiastic skepticism, which is a phrase I borrowed from a TED Talk. So a TED Talk by a guy named Astro Teller, who runs Alphabet's innovation lab called X. And enthusiastic skepticism simply says, look, I'm pretty good at what I do, but I could always get better. And for me, I do a lot of teaching. And one of the ways that I improve all the time and kind of increase the value and the story that I have to tell is I teach with other people. This photo here is from the last class I taught before quarantine. It was in Paris, and I taught with Jeff Patton. Jeff Patton and I teach together all the time, and I learn a ton by working with him, and that's how I continuously improve and get better. And then lastly, it's this concept of reinvention. The skill sets that got us here won't necessarily get us there. And so then how do we take, there's too much change. The pace of change is too rapid. Your career progresses, market demands evolve. And so how you present yourself to the market has to evolve as well. It doesn't mean that the core value changes, but how do you reinvent your core offering into new and different markets? And for me, it's really thinking about how to apply the things that I've learned so far into other domains that don't necessarily think about those ideas at the moment. So for example, this is an HBR piece I wrote recently where I talk about bringing product thinking, design thinking, agility to non-product teams like human resources and legal, finance, et cetera, right? And again, kind of bringing these ideas to career development and growth, right? Things like that is continuous reinvention. And this is what keeps the conversation going and increasingly pulls new opportunities towards you. So Mike and I put together a poll to ask you a question, because I'm always curious about this. I know where I stand, but we've got a poll, and I'm curious, Mike, if you could launch that poll.
Okay.
What's your strongest, kind of which of the 5 forever employable qualities do you think you have the most of? Which one is your strongest one? Go ahead and vote in there. I'm curious to see where this nets out. It's anonymous voting.
Oh, I'm just recognizing I can't participate. That's a pity.
No, you can't hear the host.
No, because I triggered it. It's a pity.
Yes.
All right. So a few didn't yet. There's only a few missing. If you like to complete it, nearly everybody did it. All right. Most people, I think we have a representative result. Shall I?
Yeah, for sure.
Super
interesting. So yes, so really, really interesting, right? And so again, continuous learning in a room full of agile people makes total sense. I will tell you this, I have done this poll now maybe 10 times, and self-confidence is always the lowest one in the group. And it's really, really interesting. There's a lot to learn from that as well. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit, right? And so those are the qualities, right? The qualities that'll get you there. The steps that I took to kind of build the career that I have today are these 5 steps. And I'm going to go through each one, and some of this is going to address exactly that self-confidence aspect. But the first step, and perhaps the most important one, is planting a flag. Planting a flag is identifying the domain, the slice of the content that you are going to own. Where are you going to plant that flag? And that's where you're going to declare your expertise around. You're going to declare your thought leadership and your experience around that flag. The people who have done this well are synonymous with the flags that they have planted. I'll show you, like, here's an example, right? So this is Eric Ries, right? Eric Ries, right? What's Eric Ries's flag? It's Lean Startup, right? Jake Knapp planted his flag, Design Sprints, right? That's where he planted his flag. Our friend over in Switzerland, Alex Osterwalder, planted his flag, Business Model Generation, Business Model Canvas. These folks own that space. They're synonymous with that. For me, I planted my flag around Lean UX. Lean UX was the challenge that I was facing at the time. It was bringing together Agile and UX. And I clearly, as you can see by this flow chart that my team created for me, I clearly had a big problem to solve. And along with that team and others outside of that team, this is where I planted my flag and began to tell a story around that. As I've been talking about the book and telling the story, people keep asking, well, how do I figure out where to plant my flag? And I think that's a really good question. There's, you know, at the risk of putting up yet another Venn diagram with 3 circles, this is roughly where to think about planting your flag. So first thing, list your passions and your expertise. What do you know? What are you good at? Where's your experience? What are your expertise? And don't limit it to just your professional experience, right? What are your personal passions? What do you do outside of work that you know a lot about? For example, you saw pictures of me playing music. I happen to know a lot about vintage electric pianos. When I lived in the United States, I had a collection of vintage electric pianos in my house. My wife was super grateful for that, taking up all that room. But it's something I know a lot about. And it was somewhere where I thought about planting my flag, right? The trends and current events in the world today. What's happening in the world? Technological trends, consumer consumption trends, business trends, geopolitical trends, socio-political trends. What's happening in the world? Let's list those things. Where are people going? How are they behaving? What are they consuming, right? That's important. And then ultimately, target audience size. Like, where are the people that you might be targeting? Like, who might you target with your content, and how big of an audience is that? Where those 3 circles meet, the options for where to plant your flag exist, and there likely will be more than one. And so one of the things that I got pretty good at, and again, kind of applying product thinking to this directly, is this idea that you can test which way to go with these flag options, right? So if you're thinking about putting together a content platform, plant your flag around vintage electric pianos, what's the biggest risk? Well, one of the biggest risks is how big is the target audience, and is there a way to kind of build a significant following here, right? How do you test that? You can tweet about it, you can write articles, you can share videos, you can post photos of your collection and see what kind of audience you develop around that. It's pretty cheap, right? And so we start to run experiments around our flag options. These flag options are hypotheses, basically, right? And so what are the risks around these hypotheses, and how can you test it? And that's where we start to feel out where to plant the flag, right? Where am I going to be? Where am I going to base my content platform? The next step is telling your story. Very, very important. Telling your story now is about sharing your expertise and your thought leadership, and telling that story to anyone, everywhere, all the time. The goal is to get better at your stories. Now, one of the biggest obstacles that people have with this is, what do I have to say? What unique story do I have, right? We let doubt take over, right? Everyone has a good experience. She has more to offer than I do. My story isn't extraordinary enough to be unique, right? And again, the best part of your experience, of your story, is not whether or not you've run an ultra marathon or built a massive company. The best part of your experience is that nobody else has it, you can tell a story that nobody else can. And you're the only person to have gone through everything you have in those specific ways. And so you can just start sharing that, whether you've got a year's worth of experience or 30 years worth of experience, you've got a unique story to tell. That's the story you want to tell. Now, for me, I started talking about Agile and UX. Now, look, this is August 12th, 2010. The first time I gave a talk about this topic in a public place, it was at the big Agile conference. I forget where this was. This is 2.5 years after my 35th birthday. It took me 2.5 years to get here, right? This is not an overnight process. This is steady, consistent persistence on this particular flag and this topic. 2.5 years after my 35th birthday, I give my first talk about how we're trying to solve our challenges with Agile and UX at the ladders. A month later, I give my first talk about Lean UX at a conference in Paris, right? So again, 2.5 years to the first talk on Lean UX. And then 3 years after my 35th birthday, I get my first really big break, right? So I'm 38 now, and I published this article, right? Lean UX getting out of the deliverables business in a publication called Smashing Magazine. Now at the time, in 2011, Smashing Magazine had 1 million readers. Today, I'm sure it's much, much bigger. But this took the conversation global, right? It took the Lean UX conversation global, which got me opportunities to tell my story now in new venues as well. I'm on stages telling the story of Lean UX, and basically where anyone will listen to me, I'm talking about this, right? I'm talking about our challenges, whether it's Twitter or Medium or LinkedIn or Quora, Facebook. I'm starting to write newsletters. Honestly, the only thing I stopped short of doing was Lean UX the musical, right? That was pretty much it. That's the only thing I really didn't do because it's ridiculous, right? And so the question becomes, why did my story resonate? If I'm telling this story, why is it resonating? It's resonating, first of all, because I'm solving a real problem that many people had. We're not the only people in the world who are struggling to integrate Agile and user experience design. So there's an audience for this that has a similar problem. I had actual real world experience. We were doing this work on a daily basis. And so I could share what we were doing on a daily basis. I was humble about the work. It's not like everything I wrote about, hey, we did this and it was awesome. We did this and it totally worked. We're so great at this, right? It was a lot of, we tried this and we failed. It didn't work, but here's what we learned. But everything I wrote provided practical, tactical advice, and that helped build an authentic connection with the people who were reading the material, which was super valuable. And that's really why the story resonated. So I've planted my flag and I'm telling my story, and I'm telling my story everywhere. And as I amplify my message, new opportunities emerge. And I chose to follow those new paths, those new opportunities. Now, here's the interesting thing. The more I'm telling the story, the less and less design work I'm doing. Now, if you remember from the beginning of the story, I was already worried about my design skills getting worse and losing out to better, younger designers than me. And now people are asking me less and less to do design work and to come talk about Lean UX. This is essentially what I'm doing, right? I'm on airplanes telling the story of Lean UX and not doing design work. But it turns out that new paths emerge from this, new opportunities. And one of those opportunities was an opportunity to write the Lean UX book. Now, this was presented to me at a conference by a couple of different publishers. And I'd never thought about writing a book. To me, it seemed like a mountain to climb. I didn't know how to do it, but I said, sure. I signed up to write the book. I just didn't tell them my big secret. My big secret was I didn't know how to write a book, right? And to me, that's the thing is these new opportunities emerge as you tell your story, and you've got to be prepared to take those new opportunities regardless of what you know and don't know how to do. So let me pose a question. Let me pose another question back to you here. And again, I'd love to see your answers in the chat. Okay. What was the last thing someone asked you to do that you didn't know how to do? Right? What was the last thing that someone, like, for me, it was, I mean, the first thing was write a book. I didn't know how to write a book. What was the last thing somebody asked you to do that you didn't know how to do, but you did it anyway? Put it in the chat. Like, think about it. Yeah. Starting a podcast, right? How do you do that? I mean, cook beef stroganoff. I love it. Yeah, presenting on Zoom, right? A lot of people don't know how to do this. I've been lucky enough to be doing this for a while. But yeah, make a YouTube video, start a new company, right? How to trade. I was just talking to a guy about that today. Starting communities. Believe me, starting communities is difficult. Managing those communities is super difficult as well. Man, make a movie, right? All of these things are opportunities that present themselves to us as we start to tell our story. And the thing that we need to be ready to do is we need to be ready to seize those opportunities, prepared to seize those opportunities. And that's what people call luck. They'll say, oh, you're so lucky you got a book deal. Yes, I was lucky to get that opportunity, but I was prepared to take it. Now, as I mentioned, excuse me, it took 2 years, 3 editors and 4 manuscripts to finish Lean UX. Why? Because I didn't know how to write a book. I almost didn't do it, right? Mercifully, Josh Seiden came along at the end and really helped me bring it over the finish line. 2 years to get this done. March 11th, 2013, Lean UX launches. Notice the date. This is 5 years after my 35th birthday. Every single step I took since January 31st, 2008 led up to this moment, and it took 5 years to get here, right? This is a steady, incremental progression towards building that content platform, towards planting that flag and creating that magnet for opportunities to come in. And this book literally changed my life, because now the book did really well and continues to do well. And people, started asking me to come in and teach the material in the book. And that's the 4th step. What was fascinating is, as I seized on these new opportunities and these new paths, what I realized is that I've become a teacher of this material. I recently bumped into a guy named Gibson Biddle this was back in January, actually, in Park City, Utah. I was skiing there, and Gibson was there skiing as well. He used to be the VP of product at Netflix. And a mutual friend introduced us, and we're sitting, and it turns out that he's doing the same thing that I'm doing, basically. And he asked me a good question. He said, what do you like best about what you're currently doing? And I thought about it for a second. I said, you know what? I like teaching. And he said, yeah, me too. And it never really dawned on me that I'd become a teacher. But actually, every single thing that I do is teaching. And I say yes to almost all of this stuff, right? Because when I teach, I get feedback on my material. I learn how to improve my storytelling. I understand where the material is resonating and relevant, and where it could use updating, and where there are new opportunities to gain new insights and new content opportunities. And for me, whether it's a workshop or a conference or a webinar, podcast, whatever it is, these are opportunities for me to teach and get better. The more I teach, the better I get at the craft itself, right? At the skills themselves. And so for me, this has become an invaluable part of how I work. Now you could look at that and say, look, Jeff, that's great. You're a consultant, you're self-employed. How do I do that as an in-house employee? And again, I think there's tremendous opportunities for you to do this in-house as well. Whether it's, lunch, all of these things are opportunities for you to teach in-house and to start to build that recognized expertise around yourself inside your company. So you can become forever employable inside your own organization, or start to attract opportunities from other organizations who understand that you're super valuable about this. Now, look, the 5th and final step, and then I'll wrap this up and we'll do some Q&A, is to give it all away. I learned this late. I learned this, honestly, begrudgingly. I wasn't convinced that this was the best thing to do. But what I've learned time and time again over the last couple of years is that the more I give back, the more I give away, the more opportunities come back to me. It's just this cycle that the more you give away, the more comes back to you. And to do that, you've really got to make your work and yourself easily findable and accessible, right? So post your materials online, your articles, your webinars, your podcasts, your blog posts. Make yourself easily findable and encourage people to reach out to you. So for example, if you go to my website, my blog is there, 100% free. Videos of my talks are there. And companies can simply put that video on in a conference room and have people sit around and watch the video. Excuse me, but instead, I get hired pretty regularly to give those talks, right? The more you give away, the more comes back. And I'm easy to find. Everything you need to know about me is in this one place, right? Every time I do a paid gig in a city, I always do a free event for the local community in the evening to build the community locally, to give back, right? And whether it's meetups or local conferences or businesses that maybe I have friends in an organization, I try to give back regularly. And this is your opportunity as well to do the same thing, right? Ask to speak at these events. They always need content. Do it for free. Tell your story. Get feedback on it. Build goodwill. Build community. Build an audience. Build a platform, right? And the more you give away, the more comes back to you. Now, a few things to remember as I wrap this up, okay? To stay relevant in your field, you've got to stay active. That means you've got to be present in conversations online, in various forums, in whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn or Medium or wherever, right? You've got to be present in the work. You do the work and share the work. Contribute to the industry, to the domain, to the canon, and then participate in events so people know who you are and know where you've planted your flag and what your expertise is. As you start to think about moving from the current thing to the next thing, give yourself time. I've found over the last 10, 12 years that it takes at least 2 years to really start to build up real credentials in the next thing, whatever your next thing is. So for example, I'm trying to move over into bringing agility into HR and finance and legal and that type of thing. I don't really have any credentials in HR or legal or finance, but I've started to have that conversation 18 months ago. And now I'm starting to get invitations, get a bit of an audience, have a bit of a conversation. That HBR piece that I showed you earlier, that's part of that as well. But it's taken 18 to 24 months to get there. Look, final points, and then we'll do Q&A. This is just one path. This is my path, and it worked for me. There are many other options that you can follow. You can try to go through academia or executive ed or whatever it is, right? But this is what worked for me, and you can pick and choose the pieces that work for you. But as you think about that and kind of come back to the beginning of the story of your core value, of where to plant your flag and how to continuously reinvent yourself, I always come back to this quote from Bezos, right? People always ask Bezos, what's going to change in 5 years? And Bezos always says, look, I'm not worried about what's going to change. What I focus on are what's not going to change in the next 10 to 20 years. And I focus on that. What are people always going to need? Where is there always going to be demand, right? And then how do you apply your core value to those needs and demands? People are going to need psychological safety. They're going to need collaboration. They're going to need to understand their customers, right? How we do that may change, but they're always going to need that. And so focus on those things that people always need, right? And with that, I want to say thank you very much, first of all, for listening. The book came out today. Super, super exciting to see it live. And so you can buy it today at Amazon.com. There's a ton more info at foreveremployable.com. And I'd be thrilled to kind of take your questions as you have them about any of the stuff or anything else, really, anything else that I've talked about in the past as well. So what you got? What questions do you have for me?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jeff. It was awesome.
Thank you.
And anyone who wants to go ahead with a question, just do so, please.
Oh, sorry, I misspelled it. And I wanted to add, I misspelled my own name. I wanted to add that if you want the slides, you can just go to that URL and I'll be happy to share the slides with you.
All right, cool. So who wants to be first? Who's got a question?
Yes.
I can go
Thomas.
first. Hi, Jeff. Thank you very much, Thomas here. A great talk. I mean, I'm in a very similar boat like you. And what I'm wondering is, I mean, what you're describing with the 5 is really meta skills, right? That make you forever employable, right?
Yeah.
But I find that people don't really look for those. People don't really appreciate it. It's hard to get hired for them. They want what you do with it, right? They want to hire you experience. And I find that the world is still a bit difficult to go out there with those skills if you are particularly in a more traditional side of the business, right? What is your recommendations, or what changes do you see that could make those things being recognized and make you more relevant in the more traditional side of being employed and looking for a job?
Yeah, look, I agree that most organizations still are doing the traditional, let's list off the technical skills that we need for the job, and whoever has those skills, that's who we're going to hire. I think that, look, I agree with you. I think if you came into a job interview, for example, or you wanted to come into an organization and you said, look, I'm entrepreneurial and I have self-confidence and I continuously improve myself, I'd say that's great, but can you write code, right, or whatever, right? I think that you have to present it in a way that illustrates those qualities in the context of the thing that they're looking for. So for example, if you're looking for technical skills, you can say, listen, look, I do have those technical skills. And one thing that I pride myself on is staying current on those technical skills because I participate in this community and that community. And also I've been thinking about writing a couple of articles about my experience with this other technology, which I think leads to learning some more stuff about that. So what you're doing is you're demonstrating the qualities in the context of the value that your hiring company is looking for without explicitly mentioning those particular values. And so it's positioning yourself, it's marketing, and it's kind of subliminally saying, I have these qualities. Does that make sense? Awesome.
Okay, here's a question in the chat. And yeah, well, I invited, I'm not sure about pronouncing this properly, but said he or she could raise a question directly, but probably you can read it, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
Why do you think self-confidence, I think that was the poll, is at the bottom of the list of characteristics?
Yeah, I'll tell you why I think that is. I think because everybody's got imposter syndrome. I think everybody has it. Even the most confident looking people, I think everybody's got imposter syndrome. I have it, certainly, right? Especially today, kind of watching the book launch and kind of eagerly awaiting some reviews to show up ultimately on Amazon, that type of thing. You start to wonder, right? Did I write a good book? Are people going to hate it? No one's going to review it. No one likes it, that type of thing. And so I think that that's why there is. I think people have a lot of imposter syndrome. Like, what do I have to add? I think it's overwhelming too to think about telling your story because it feels like everything's been said, right? I mean, we have the internet. What could I possibly add to the conversation about anything at this point, right? Especially Agile, right? And gosh, there's so much content around it. And the reality, again, is that, yes, everything's been said except your story and your perspective on things. I did a little research not too long ago to try to find the earliest blog post I'd ever written. And the earliest blog post I could find was from 2003, 17 years ago. And it was a comparison of wireframing techniques between Visio wireframes and HTML wireframes. That was what the blog post was about. Now, even in 2000 and in 2003, everything had already been written about wireframing techniques, right? And yet, I had a point of view. I had my opinion. I had something to say about it, so I said it, right? Did it redefine the industry? No, but it got me out there. It got me writing. It started planting my flag that I had some expertise in this particular field. And so I think that you've really got to believe that you've got a unique story to tell. And I would draw on your past experiences. If there's one thing that writing this book has taught me, is that every time you add personality, right? I'm just going to say personality, as opposed to, because I know I certainly wasn't comfortable sharing personal details. So I'm not going to say personal details. I'll just say personality. Every time you add personality to your story, it resonates that much more. Even if you're talking about something that's been around, that everybody has talked about, right? So for example, I could talk about my time in the circus forever. I was there for 6 months. I have 1,000 stories I could tell you, right? So I add those stories into the mix every now and again. It adds personality. It makes it interesting, and it makes it unique, right? I doubt very much there's very, very many other people in our industry that worked in the circus. And so, you know, I think that's why. I think that's the answer.
There is another one which is sounds like a compliment, you know, like you being the thought leader on the topic of lean UX.
Yeah.
And at the same time, whatever you wrote here is actually then optional. I'm not sure. What's your
Yeah, so I
thought
disagree.
about it?
So look, yeah, so Reinhard, look, for better or for worse, I'm the lean UX guy, right? That's it. I am, you know, Google lean UX, my name comes up. It's literally hanging over my head. There it is, right there, right? That helped. But look, I wasn't the only one solving for this. I wasn't the only one talking about this. I genuinely believe that, look, hypothetical situation, okay? Because I like this question a lot. Let's say that I was doing that same exact work that we were doing at the ladders in 2008, 9, 10, 11, into 2012. And I never told anyone, right? I never told the story. I never shared anything that we did. We just, you know, worked in our little world and solved our own problem. I guarantee you, I would not be the lean UX guy today, right? The reason why I planted my flag there and grew around that was because I explicitly decided to be entrepreneurial about this. I decided to create a reality for myself where I didn't have to compete with designers that I was ultimately going to lose to. And so those qualities, that's, you know, look, it was a big deal for me, right? There is self-confidence in there. There is entrepreneurialism. There's humility in there and saying, look, I'm going to try this. And if it doesn't work, I got to write my CV again, you know, and get that out there, kind of come back to the thing I said I was never going to do again. So I absolutely believe that I chose my flag well and timed it well. By the way, for the first time in my career, I spent a decade missing the boat, like time after time after time, finally landed in the right place at the right time. And then it was those qualities and those steps that allowed me to make that my unique selling proposition. Without that, I didn't have to do that, right? So I do think those qualities were critical to my success with that topic.
All right, sounds good. Another question. Any next question? I always love
what else? Reinhard said I convinced him. that he wanted to be provocative.
Anybody else wants to ask something which might be very personal, you know, because the content related to the content, or
we could talk about Agile stuff. We could talk about product stuff. Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it is about a product, right? It's about ourselves somehow, as I understood. It's a little bit weird thinking about people or ourselves as products. Caro, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question, and actually it's personal. Okay. You said you fear, right? Anxiety, right? That you're not gonna be as good in a few years as the young generation. Is it still fear today that keeps you motivated?
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah, because the kids are still out there. I still have the kids. You know, they're significantly hungrier now as teenagers. So, and so there's yes, absolutely. And you know what's fascinating is I'm eager to stay relevant, and I find that. Look, you know what these platforms look like. There's so much noise on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Medium, on YouTube, on Instagram, if you're going to use Instagram, right? I don't use Facebook for anything, but I know there's noise on there, right? And so how do you stay relevant? How do you stay top of mind? How do you keep people paying attention to you, reading your newsletter, you know, subscribing, that type of thing? That absolutely keeps me up at night. And to be that's part of the reason why I went down this path, right? I started this 2 years ago, right? Remember, start the next thing 2 years in advance. I started this 2 years ago because I'm interested in expanding my audience. And if you look at my trajectory, everything I've done has been an explicit step in broadening my audience. So Lean UX, super niche, right? Especially initially, right? Like, first edition Lean UX is a design book for designers by designers, right? Second edition Lean UX is more like a product management, a bit more broader product management, agile focus, right? Sense and Respond was a business book, right? Harvard Business Review Press published it. The target audience was the business world, right? Forever Employable is the world, really. I don't see a limit there. Right, but at the core, coming back to the beginning of my presentation, right? At the core, the value that I've delivered across all of that content, that kind of content arc, is the same, right? It's about customer centricity. It's about understanding your users and your buyers and your customers. It's about agility. It's about continuous learning. It's about experimentation. It's just the application has been different, right? So whether it's designs, products, businesses, careers, and to me, yes, it's the fear of becoming irrelevant, not being able to pay my bills, having to get a boss again. I haven't had a boss in a while, and I don't want one. So yes, absolutely. This is what keeps me motivated. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good question.
There's more questions now in the chat, and I would love to pick two. There's probably more coming, and there's really two very interesting ones. The first one, from Ulysses, do you think that this is a winner-takes-all game, or is there room for smaller players besides the big fish? What do you think?
Am I a big fish? Are you calling me a big fish? I think there's room for everybody. I really do. No, I really do. I'm not being diplomatic for diplomacy's sake. I believe, like I said, that everyone has a story and everyone has value to add to the conversation, and you just need to find it. I mean, the challenge, honestly, the challenge that I see. So for example, take Agile coaching, right? So this is, right, Agile Coaching Exchange, right? Agile coaching is at risk of, in my opinion, Agile coaching has become a commodity. right? There's so many people offering agile coaching, right? So I think you've got a tremendous opportunity in there, right? How do you rise above? What is your unique angle? What's the slice of agile coaching where you're going to plant your flag and kind of rise above the rest of the pack? And again, I believe that there is room for multiple slices, right? There's, you could be the agile coach for the pharmaceutical industry. You could be the agile coach that works really well with design-led organizations. You could be the agile coach that does really well with government projects, right? Like there's 1,000 different ways to slice that. And so, yeah, I think there's room for a variety of voices. And one of the things that I think you'll see is, I hope, and one thing that certainly I've been working on behind the scenes and a little bit in front of the scenes, but mostly behind the scenes, is elevating new voices, right? Providing access and opportunity for those new voices. And for those of us who are fortunate enough to be in a position to have a platform and a stage and a microphone and that type of thing, I think it's our responsibility to do that, to provide those opportunities for those new voices so that they have the same shot that we did. Yeah, so that's a very long way of saying yes.
Space for everyone. Cool. And here's another interesting question in the chat from Monica. Is this really about being employable or about creating a career as author, speaker, external consultant? It sounds a little bit blunt.
No, I get it. This is why I like sort of German language meetups, because there's no BS. It's like, here it is, Jeff. Right? That's always the case. I did a ton of work in Munich last year, and it's like, no, I'm in Germany a lot. Anyway, which, by the way, I live in Spain. They just opened Spain to you folks. Come on down, get some sun. I'm the tourism minister for Spain, by the way, as well. So look, this is absolutely
that don't insult the Germans.
Not at all. But like literally, like there's headlines that are like, the German tourists have begun arriving in Ibiza and in Menorca. Anyway, look, this is absolutely about being employable, right? You can choose to look. If you build a platform, you draw opportunities to yourself. What you choose to do with those opportunities is up to you. You can use those opportunities to become an author, a speaker, an external consultant. Absolutely. You can also use those opportunities to become forever employable as an in-house employee. In theory, you're adding value to the organization where you already work, because you're helping grow the practice, you're helping build thought leadership inside the organization. You are creating a sense of like, you're the go-to person for certain things. And you're improving the hiring brand of the organization, right? People want to go work where other smart people work, people they can learn from. And that's a tremendous opportunity, I think, for you. In the same sense, you're also creating opportunities. You're creating a platform that attracts opportunities from outside that organization. So other companies are going to say, wow, like that person is really, she's really become the thought leader on this topic. We're going to try to poach her and move her over to this other company, right? So maybe you get a better job out of it. So I believe that this is future-proofing your career. I believe that it's creating a situation where when crisis hits, you don't necessarily have to panic because you've already got opportunities coming in, right? So if I think about the 20 years that I've been working professionally, we've had, the dot-com crash, we've had terrorist attacks, we've had the big recession, now we've got a pandemic. And it's certainly in the last 10 years, I'm panicking less than I was in the first 10 years, because people are aware of who I am, and there's always sort of inbound requests coming in. So I think this can work for either situation, in-house or external consultant.
Cool. I've got a question, Jeff. It's now not going into a different direction, which might be also interesting for you. And if I would decide to work on my career in this direction and consider myself a product, where would I search for help? Again, this might be an invitation now, you being the new type of career coach. Is that a normal career coaching we would search for here, or is that a totally new way of thinking? Because product thinking is a little bit of a different, I think, approach.
I think that, look, so I believe, my hypothesis is that there's an opportunity to take the things that we do on a regular basis with teams and products and services and apply them in different contexts. And I believe that the majority of the world, which is a bold statement, but I believe the majority of sort of the working world doesn't think like we do, right? People who work in agile and agility and digital product development, digital service development. And these concepts, for example, these concepts of hypotheses and experiments and evidence-based decision-making and continuous improvement and learning and inspect and adapt and, all these, build, measure, learn, and think, make, check, right? These concepts are foreign to the overwhelming majority of working folks. And so when you introduce them, I've seen sort of these epiphanies, these light bulbs go on. They're like, oh, you mean I don't have to do the same thing that my parents did? I don't have to do the same thing that I was told to do, right? The same process. No, there's other ways to go about this. The reality is not everybody's going to do it. And it's those folks who do have that entrepreneurial spirit, a little bit of self-confidence, right? The perpetual curiosity to reinvent and improve on a continuous basis. Those are the folks that are going to seize on this. And I think that there's an opportunity to help them. So, for me, that's why I have this conversation.
Yeah, awesome. So to me, that sounds like, here we are in an agile space. So there's obviously this topic is open for everyone, as you said, every person around the globe. But as agile people, we're very often helping organizations to transform, or whatever that means, because I'm not a big fan of transformation as such, but that's another topic. But here we could talk about personal transformation, right? That might be a more interesting term, because that's what you might trigger somehow.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I'm wondering, because the story you present is actually driven by the typical trigger. There is a sense of urgency. There is something where you suddenly sit down and say, hey, if I'm going to continue this way, where I'm going to end up? So fear comes up. Is that something we need to create ourselves to say, hey, I need to think more carefully? As you said, everybody is an agile coach. Where's that going? Hey, oh God, I should sit down. Or can you just sit down and say, oh, let's have a creative evening and think a little bit about myself and see where that goes? What do you think? I mean, again, this is not scientific here. It's more like.
So look, I saw a tweet today that said something like, all of you who had to write like 2 years ago, or whatever, like the tweet was from today, but it said 2 years ago, for all of you who had to write your 2020, your plan for 2020, how's that going?
Yeah.
Right? And to me, that's the key. To me, that I mean, it's snarky, but it's reality, right? There's no the concept of corporate loyalty, I don't believe exists anymore. The pace of change is only increasing. There's instability in markets and jobs and industries, right? There's disruptions, right? So I think it's naive to sit here and say, you know what, I'm going to ride this train for the next 20 years. It's never going to change, right? And I think that the longer you wait to do something proactive, to create that safety net, to future-proof your career, the harder it's going to be and the less effective it's going to be. People ask me all the time, they're like, well, recently they started asking, like, what would you tell, your younger self, I said I would have woken up, I would have started when I was 25, not when I was 35, right? Just to have built a bigger platform, to have more, just more material, more content, more opportunities, that type of thing. And so I think if you're going to kind of just be like, hey, let's have a creative, like, certainly you can workshop this, right? But I think ultimately, if you truly want to create that safety net, ensure the longevity of your career, I think you got to take this seriously. That's what I would say.
Cool. Any other question here? Is anybody curious about something which was triggered?
Jeff,
Agile coaches around.
what I'm always hearing parents ask me is, what would I recommend their children to do? So what should they teach their children, what they should learn in order to be, whatever, still employable or successful in a world that goes, whatever, VUCA, what are you going to call that? What's your recommendation? What do you recommend parents to teach their children, or tell children what to learn, what to study, what to do?
Yep. So I do this with my kids, and they like it. My teenage kids like this. Just to be clear, I'm teaching them how to write. That's, to me, is the most important thing. Like to be able to communicate verbally with the written word, and then they can decide how to use that. But to me, that is such a valuable skill that I only developed. You know, I think when I started when I was 30, really started writing when I was 30. In any case, that's what I would recommend. Work with your kids, teach them how to write, make sure they can tell a story in a compelling way, because they can use that anywhere. And to me, that's the most powerful thing you can do. So that's it. That's what I do. That's what I recommend. Most important thing, I think.
Right. Yeah, that's a super interesting topic, by the way. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I see this tension potentially coming to the table when you start looking at these, what do you call it? The 5 points. It's not recipes, right? It's a plan.
It's the process that I used, right?
Yeah. So to go the same direction, like saying, first of all, okay, I would like to be like, you know, like there is this desire. You don't want just to become something because it's sellable. You want to be sellable, or maybe the term doesn't fit. You don't want to be sellable. You just want to, you know, fit somebody's demand by really being who you want to be. But what are you going to do then if you just recognize, yeah, nice thing, but it doesn't work? So now comes this, you know, product thinking. I think that's going to be very hard when it's about your own personality to say, the world doesn't want me in this way. What am I going to do now? You know, change how the world wants me, or just be stubborn and say, I will create the demand here and it will come. What do you think? I mean, again, we can't prove it now, but.
Yeah, it's a good question. At the beginning I asked the collective you, what's your core value? What problem do you help people solve? All of you put in very foundational problems, right? None of you, if I recall, said something like, I teach people how to do stand-ups, right? Right. Nobody said that, right?
It's what people I did today, by the way.
Right. No, I hear you, right? But that's how you help people navigate uncertainty. That's what you said, right? You help people navigate uncertainty, right? That is how you do that today. Okay. Now, as the world changes, you're going to shift your delivery channel, your form factor, the format, whatever it is, based on how the world changes. But you're still going to help people navigate uncertainty, because we can't predict the future, right? Until we can predict the future, right? You're going to be forever employable if you can continue to reinvent how you're helping people navigate uncertainty, right? And so if you try a thing, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to help people navigate uncertainty by teaching them how to do stand-ups. And it doesn't sell. Right? Okay, cool. That didn't work out. Let's learn why that didn't work out. It didn't work out because there's 50,000 other people doing that right now, and I didn't differentiate myself well enough. Okay, great. How will I differentiate myself? Let me try another experiment. Let me learn from that and use evidence, right, to move that forward. So again, it's applying that product thinking. You're not, and what you're doing is you're pivoting, right? You're pivoting on your core value. Now, look, if you continuously keep hitting the wall, right? You've run experiment after experiment after experiment, and you're learning, and you just can't deliver this core value, then maybe you're not solving a problem that people have. And that, that becomes a bit more of an existential conversation at that point. But I think until then, that's the trick is to keep trying different ways to deliver that value.
Right. I can already imagine, a market of investors who would invest into people's stories somehow, and I don't know, support people to grow as person, and let's see where that goes. But here, Pablo put an interesting question that sounds for me like doubt, because he's talking about freelancers, a freelancer agile coach or any similar role. Do you think companies trust a freelancer to enhance the way they do things? But it sounds like he's in doubt about his current role. I'm not sure, Pablo, I was just picking it up. You can just still add to it. I
know lots. I know many independent agile coaches that are embedded in companies or on teams. They've got contracts with them. So I think generally speaking, yes. But to your point, Pablo, I think there's a shelf life to that. I think that there's an expiration date to a point where that freelancer then needs to say, look, okay, I'm just going to join full time. Because look, when you walk out the door, that knowledge walks out with you. But I think initially, absolutely, I've seen that model multiple times, and I don't see why not. Plus, it helps you kind of feel out the relationship between the organization and yourself, and whether or not that's something you want to do there long term. So, yeah, I think it can absolutely happen.
Pablo, did that answer your question? Will you still just add what you still want to know?
Yeah. Well, I know some independent coaches, but I will know them from read about what they write or in a meeting or something. Actually, in the work, everyone that I know, they are employable under some company, not giving a freelance work. So that's what I would like to understand, how you really do get to the business.
I mean, look, I do freelance coaching. It's not agile coaching, but it's certainly the work that I do. People read what I write. Now, if you go to my blog, you'll read, like, the articles that I publish are very specific. They're about a specific challenge with typically a specific solution that I propose. Now, that proposal comes from experience. And if people like what I say, they say, hey, can you come in and help us with that problem? Because we have the same exact problem that you wrote about, and it seems like you know what to do about it. And so for me, the writing, the speaking, the blogging, the podcasting, whatever it is, generates those inbound leads. And then I don't have a desire to go full-time in-house with these organizations. So I expect my engagement to go anywhere between 3 and 6 months. Okay. Sometimes it goes longer, sometimes it doesn't. But I expect 3 to 6 months. And then usually it's a question of, well, if you're not going to come in-house, then we need to figure out how to do this on our own. Okay. Hopefully I've given them enough by then. That's okay with me.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Right, cool. Again, I think that brings us back to this question about agile coach, but what would it really be, and how am I different? What am I actually doing? I like this, what's sometimes being recommended. I'm not sure how you feel about this. Use LinkedIn, don't put your job title there, but basically write what you actually offer. So what you do, and basically that means who you are. I think that resonates quite well with Forever Employable, right? It might be a first step to think about your LinkedIn profile.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I've worked hard on my LinkedIn profile. The challenge with that is data. Is it working? It depends on, again, I think the data point is what kind of leads is it pulling in, and if it's not pulling in the kind of leads that you want, then change, right? Try something different.
Yeah. All right. Is there any other question left? Is there anything you would regret not having asked? I mean, again, it's, going to bed tonight and then just, oh shit, I forgot to ask Jeff. I have to read the book, which is again an invite. Good idea to do. Because if not, I think we're pretty fine coming to a closure. And closure again means, I think, Jeff, you put already a few pointers where people can reach you. There is the slides. We can, again, even redistribute your slides on the meetup group.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Oh, no, there is.
So that's for the book. And then
for the book,
if you want the slides, just go to jeffgothelf.com/slides. Yeah. There's a little form there, and I will send you the slides.
All right. And yeah, there's tons of opportunities to meet Jeff. I hope it will be possible meeting him in Vienna, because we're actually planning a special CSBO class with him and Jeff Patton end of September. Again, it's getting people again in the same room. It's possible. I'm just coming from a client and it feels awesome, although I like online stuff. And yeah, it's been great having seen all of you. It's only been 30% of the number of people registered, but it's been the right 30%. And it's been a huge pleasure, Jeff, having had you. I really admire your work, to be honest.
Thank you.
Like many people obviously here. Yeah, and I'm really happy staying in touch and see what's coming out of it. And I'm continuing. I can't actually wait getting back into my car, because I obviously listen to your book in the car. So I'm happy about a morning traffic jam tomorrow. Really looking forward.
Terrific. Folks, thank you very much, Mike. Thanks for having me. This was great. Again, don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. And I look forward to seeing you all in the real world soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Cheers. Bye-bye, my friend.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.